Hi, welcome to another episode of Summit Racing Equipment Quick Flicks. My name is Norm. Today we're going to talk about 5-liter Ford camshaft selection and some of the things that go along with that process. Okay, camshafts. 5-liter Fords, internal combustion engines, they all respond to cam changes. Things you want to consider though, we want to kind of give you an idea where to head here before we start looking at cams particularly. Drive ratio, things that involve your drive ratio. Tires, tire diameter, the height, the drive ratio in the differential, what you're going to be doing for a transmission. Are you going to figure that you're at 1-to-1 on your final drive? Or are you going to be on an overdrive situation? AOD, AODE, an 082 gear, I think, an 064, overdrives are all over the place. So if you're going to use that, know where you're headed. Also, the intention of the vehicle. Is it going to be a stoplight to stoplight car? Are you planning on going on a 1,000-mile trip for vacation? Things like that to consider. And budget. Okay, and are you going to stay with just a camshaft change alone? If you're not going to stay camshaft change alone, then what are your plans for the future? Am I going to get into pistons? Am I going to reconsider compression? Am I going to move into an aftermarket head? What am I going to do about valve train? Things to consider as we move through this process here of finding a 5-liter camshaft for your Ford. Let's think about a few more things and then we'll start looking at cams specifically. I'm going to take for granted that you're a EC4 system, you're staying computer friendly, EFI, that you're mass air. Okay, very important that you be a mass air system. If you're older version and you've converted, you're right with us. Okay, so first of all, think about your hydraulic lifter preload. You're going to have some way of accommodating and changing, making that adjustment for hydraulic roller lifter preload. Ford hydraulic roller lifters like about 40, 45, 50 thousandths worth of preload. Some people do set them deeper. There's some science to that. I'm not going to go into that at this point. But you're going to need a method to make the adjustment. The factory 5.0 head is a bolt-down pedestal style rocker system. It's a bolt-to-torque. Ford, in their grand design, built a 444 lift, built the push rod length, the geometry, the torque spec all around that preload. So when you change the lift, you're going to have a way of coming back and making that adjustment on the preload. There's some ways to do that. The most expensive way is to go to a adjustable valve train on an aftermarket head. If you're not going that way and it's not in your budget or for whatever reason, the factory Ford head, you can still get there, okay? So, and the way you would do that was a shim kit through Ford Racing and or push rod length. Also, there's an aftermarket roller rocker that is a 5/16 bolt down, goes right on the factory head. It's manufactured by Harlan Sharp, and it is adjustable. So that would allow you to come back into range on your regular push rod, no shims. So nice thought there, but you're going to have some form or some method of making that hydraulic roller lifter preload correct. Okay, so let's talk about cams specifically then. I want to go in two different paths today. I want to try to go with that 270, 280, 290 horse range, maybe a 300 horsepower 302, something like that, or a 300 horsepower 306, depending on what you have. And then we'll look at taking you beyond the horsepower per cubic inch range here in just a moment. But for the horse per cube range, or maybe a hair less, you have the E cam, the B cam, the F cam, all Ford, the TrickFlow 2000, Comp, Crane, Crowder, Lunat, everybody makes a cam for this range on your 5.0 hydraulic roller platform. In here, you're probably going to stay with something with a larger lobe separation angle. 112, 114 helps the computer learn and pull the right information without throwing codes or service engine light. You are going to need, at the upper end of this, though, probably a custom program. I will say this in passing, the E-cam, the baby of the bunch, is a CARB EO friendly cam for those people that are looking specifically for that range or that qualifier. There are a few other CARB EO cams on the market. But coming back into perhaps like the F-cam, nice lift, durations coming in toward the smaller side of 220s. And that's probably what we're really looking at here, is something in the smaller 220s, the larger 2-teens, lifts in that 460, 470, 480 range, maybe a 490. This range will allow you to accommodate your factory head. It will allow you to accommodate your factory fuel system. Keep in mind that your 19 pound-hour injector is only good to a theoretical 304 or so horsepower. So this range helps keep the necessity of moving into other things at a minimum. Anytime you do any cam lifter or any cam swap on the 5.0, I would recommend going with the matching spring retainer lock package, okay? Even if it's only a 15 to 20 thousandths lift increase from the 444, you may not have the correct seat pressure at open valve. The big thing there is to bring that valve shut when you reach that higher lift. You get the flutter on the valve, you lose compression, you lose power. So always run the correct spring. Again, the duration range we're talking about here in the 220s or higher 2-teens allows me to stay with my factory gearing in a lot of cases. It allows me to stay with my factory converter from an automatic. Will a 373 benefit me? Yes, it will. Do I need a 411? Probably not. In fact, a 411 may hinder me in some ways. The gear ratio change, always something to keep in mind around these cam patterns, but usually not a necessity. Again, torque converter. If I need a $2,000 or 2400 converter, can I run one? Sure, you can. Is it always a necessity? No, it's not. Bear in mind is that as you get deeper into converters, you're giving away efficiency. Okay, so this 300 horsepower or less range, this horse per cubic inch range or less, really helps your build by not having to move into a bunch of required add-ons down the road, or at the moment actually. Okay, so let's think about camshaft specifically then. We're going to start with the smaller side of the spectrum. I'm going to talk about cams that are 460, 470, 480, 490 lift range, running lobe separations of 112, 114, maybe even out toward 116, 118. In that, you're going to see duration numbers at 50 in the upper teens, 214, 216, 218, the smaller 220s, 220, 222, like that. So that type of a range. Those cams with a few bolt-ons are quite capable of getting you near or at a horse per cube. That's a nice range for a 300 horse 302. It's a nice package. It's a livable package. It's a drivable package. It's a fun package to deal with because there's not a lot of headache that goes along with that, and it's easier on your wallet. I don't have to have an aftermarket cylinder head. I can have one, but I don't have to. I do have to think about some things as I move to the bigger side of that range, though. Maybe a converter in the larger numbers, especially as duration goes up. Converter is probably going to be something you want to watch for. Also, as duration goes up, gear set changes. Any one of the cams we're looking at in this range would definitely like to have a 355 gear or a 373 gear. Do I need a 411? Probably not. The beautiful side of this, though, is I can probably run my stock converter. I can probably run my stock gear. But there's always the necessity of bringing those into the picture as you move into the larger numbers or into the larger camshafts in this range. Okay, so we talked about the entry level or the more moderate horsepower level range of camshafts. At this range here, the more aggressive profiles, we know we've got to get into something for adjustable valve train, whether it's an aftermarket head or a conversion rocker or something. You have to move beyond the pedestal shim kit at this point. Also, The enhancements that you may have done at the upper range of your smaller conversion, your smaller cam selection, are probably going to go bye-bye as you move into the upper range of this camshaft range, okay? So your 110 liter-hour pump is probably going to be replaced by a 155 as you move deeper into this cam area. Your injector that you may have gone from your 19 to your 24, well, hey, your 24 may go bye-bye as you move into the deeper range of this cam selection here, this cam offering. In this range, converters are going to be mandatory instead of an optional. You could be into 2,400, $3,000, 3,200 on a converter, depending on what your application is. Converter ideas should be based around the gear ratio, okay? Gear ratio changes are going to be mandatory. You're not going to get away without a gear change here. Unless you have one of those rare cars that was 373 from the factory and you're working with the smaller side of things. Having said that, to say this cam family, we're starting to look at cams with the duration areas of 228, 230 at 50, perhaps on up toward 248 at 50. Really big numbers. Hence the need for a converter, the need for a gear set, the need for an adjustable valve train. Also keep in mind, in that 500 zone, as I mentioned before, you have to verify valve to piston clearance on the factory Ford piston, okay? Ford mentions it, I'm going to mention it again. Lift in this range is going to start somewhere in the upper 5 teens, 518, 520, like that, and move towards, gosh, 540, 560. I mean, big numbers, very, very big power producing numbers. The upside of all this requirement and all this cam selection and this cam change is great acceleration, snappy, seat of the pants type fun. Can I say fun? I said fun, all right? So snappy type fun, quick at the track, very aggressive type cam patterns that will get you into that 340 horse zone really quick. Add-ons become a necessity though at this point. This is no longer just a cam change with matching springs and retainers. We're talking a calibrated mass air. The upper level here is going to need a custom program. Like I said, the fuel system to bring all this on board and so that you're not lean at RPM. The gear set, the converter if you're an automatic, all of that's going to come into play. But some beautiful stuff. In this range, you've got the X-Cam from Ford Racing, the Z-Cam, the Zilla Cam from Ford Racing, my favorite perhaps. Also trick flows in here with the upper level with their 3003 cam, I believe it is, and their 3002, which is a hair smaller. Their 3003 is probably the upper edge of where we would go today in this discussion as a stage 2 or phase 2 type camshaft, more aggressive. You can always go beyond that, but I'm going to save that for another day, okay? But this level, very aggressive. In fact, if you were looking at the trick flow on the big cam, I would say your bottom end is going to need some beef. The factory case, the factory block is only going to take you so far and you're going to start getting the twist. So other things start to come in play here as you move into the upper level of this range. I think that in closing, I would say a few things. Obviously, the deeper you go, the more horsepower, the quicker, the snappier, all those adjectives come into play. Also, the more other ideas have to be on board here, the more you're going to be into other parts. You know, heads are probably here. Maybe a steel crank, steel rods, things that come into play as you reach that upper level. A main girdle, definitely a necessity in the upper range here. From there, you know, the gear set, the converter, as I mentioned, your fuel system, you got to keep an eye on fuel delivery all the time with your 5.0. Programming, calibrated mass air, maybe an idea just for you guys or gals that are supercharger friendly. Ford offers a friendly supercharger cam. Let's see, I'm trying to think, I believe it's the F. It runs a wider lobe separation angle than the others. They're not the only ones, but when you look at a supercharger, keep in mind that you're forcing the air You don't need tons of duration. You don't need tons of lift because the air is being pushed through to the backside of the valve and into the chamber. What you do need, though, is more lobe separation angle. You want to keep the overlap reduced in a supercharger application. Having said that, I think I'm going to close for today. So if you happen to like this video, and I hope you do, please leave your comments below, and we'll see you the next time on Summit Racing Quick Flicks.